Welcome back to Operation Freedom, folks. I'm Dr. Dave Janda, broadcasting from our ancillary bunker, Lincoln Main Freedom Bunker in the People's Republic of Ann Arbor. We're here for you every Sunday from 2 to 5 Eastern, live, 24/7 at davejanda.com. Stop on by. We have a tremendous amount of extra content, extra guests, extra analysis, and archives to all of our shows at davejanda.com. When you stop by, you will be educated. You will be empowered. You will not be disappointed. 100% guarantee. Another 100% guarantee is my next guest. My next guest has put, frankly, his life on the line by trying to put you ahead of the globalist constructed curve that ends in a brick wall with the shattering of your freedoms, your liberties, and your financial future. He is you can almost say he's a modern day Nostradamus in the financial world. He's told you for years ago what is transpiring today. Now, for that gift, he has been slandered, libeled, misrepresented, targeted, ridiculed. But in spite of all that, he's continued and he's been completely on target. He has told you the financial ship, international financial ship, has hit an iceberg. And the captain of the ship, the banksters, are telling you that just listen to the music. Listen to the wonderful music. In other words, listen to the propaganda and just stay on board. Don't get into lifeboats. But he's told you not only to get in the lifeboat, but he's told you where the lifeboats are at. Ed Steer is a keen observer of the financial scene and director of the Gold Antitrust Action Committee. So GATA, G-A-T-A, GATA.org. He is the editor and founder of Ed Steer's Gold and Silver Daily and Digest. Ed Steer, goldsilver.com. Ed Steer, S-T-E-E-R, goldsilver.com. It's the first thing I read 5 days a week. Comes out 5 days a week. Ed usually has it in our email inbox by 4 or 5 in the morning. And it really sets the day for what to look for as the day progresses from a financial as well as geopolitical standpoint, because they're really tight at the hip. It's my honor to welcome back to the Operation Freedom Show and platform Ed Steer. Ed, welcome back.
Well, it's good to be back, Dave, and good afternoon to you and to all your listeners.
Ed, when you survey the public, what is the most where is the public the least informed as it relates to what's happening in the financial world and in the precious metals world?
Well, in the financial world, this moment in time that we've been working our way up to for the last since starting in about 2019, so the last 3 or 4 years, and it's getting bigger and bigger all the time. We're living in the biggest financial and economic Ponzi scheme the world has ever known, and that far exceeds what happened in the build-up to the crash of 1929, which is coming up on 100 years ago now. And this is all brought about by massive amounts of money printing by the Federal Reserve just to keep this thing going. But we are living at the top, very apex of a bubble that's been building ever since we went off the gold standard in 1971. And it's not a matter of when this is going to happen or if it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen and when they decide to pull the plug on this thing. But right now, these may look like the best of the times, but the worst of the times are right around the corner when this whole thing collapses.
And Ed, if you got in an elevator with an individual and the individual looked at you and said, "Are you Ed Steer?" You said, "Yes." And if that individual looked at you and said, "What's the number one issue at hand I need to know about in your subspecialty of the financial world, precious metals? What's the one thing I need to know?"
Well, the first thing that I would tell anybody that owns a bond is to sell them, hit the bid, and I would look at all the financial at the financial scene, mainly meaning the stock market, and look how completely overpriced about half a dozen of the top stocks are, and I would suggest that they go to cash, and take part of that cash and put it into the money of kings, which has been money through all of recorded history. And that's gold, and of course you have to include silver in that, which is the money of the people. And that's what I tell people: go to cash and the precious metals. That's what I'd be telling them to do today.
Ed, on July 7th, Friday, July 7th, there was an announcement that came out through Russia TV, through the Russian embassy. I want to play this clip for you and your take in the significance of what was said and what's coming down the road in August. Derek, hit it.
The BRICS group is set to introduce a new currency backed by gold, in contrast to the credit-backed US dollar, with countries lining up to join the growing initiative.
The BRICS countries are planning to introduce a new trading currency which will be backed by gold. More and more countries recently expressed desire to join BRICS.
The decision comes a month ahead of scheduled Alliance Summit in Johannesburg, South Africa. 41 countries have since shown their interest in BRICS membership and its new currency implementation. Russia's foreign ministry has stated that if African states show enthusiasm, the group's expansion may also be on a Russia-Africa summit's agenda in the end of July. As of now, the BRICS group remains comprised of Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. Former statistician general of South Africa, Pali Lehola, says the gold-backed currency will facilitate the advancement of developing countries.
Derek, Ed, your take.
Look, as I just mentioned previously, up until 1971, there's always been at least one currency in the world, if not all of them, backed by precious metals. In most cases, it's been gold, but in some countries, it's been silver, like in Britain and China and places like that. You cannot have a fiat currency, which is an unbacked currency, that isn't abused by the central banks and governments of the world. And they've taken full advantage of the fact that we no longer have a currency backed by precious metals. And that is where we are today. I mean, if you take a look at where the stock market is, the bond market is, the price of everything, houses, you name it, inflation. I mean, inflation is just currency debasement. And because United States and every other country in the world has been printing money hand over fist, we're seeing currency debasement, which is another name for inflation, everywhere and in everything, and it is increasing faster and faster. It's not going to slow down no matter what the government people tell you, because they're going to continue printing money. And of course, China and Russia, China being one of the largest economies in the world and have been around for about 5,000 years, and the Russians and everybody knows that this system, this fiat currency system backed by the U.S. dollar, is going to come to crashing end someday, which I've already spoken about in the introduction to today's program. They see that clearly. They know it's coming, and they want to get out from underneath this U.S. dollar because, like the French, it wasn't the president, it was the finance minister, said way back in the 1960s, the United States has this exorbitant privilege of printing the world's reserve currency. And they've abused that to the nth degree, and they're using the currency, they've politicized it, they've now weaponized it against any country that they don't like their policies, or their external or internal. And of course, the major one here is when they see when the world BIS or the World Bank seized the Russians' foreign reserves, and that, of course, was the end of it. And the Russians and Chinese says that's enough. We're going to get out from underneath this. And of course, the Saudi, the countries of the Gulf states that produce the oil and sell their oil for U.S. dollars, they've had it too. Okay, and they said, we can't price our oil in anything else. We have to have a new currency. And as the old U.S. reserve currency slides into history, the Russians and the Chinese and a bunch of other countries are going to come up with what we should have had all along, and that's a commodity-based currency backed by gold, and that's what the Russians and Chinese are talking about, and will be subject to conversation at their meeting in Johannesburg in August.
Well, Ed, Janet Yellen, Secretary of the Treasury, hobbled over to China, reportedly consumed some psychedelic mushrooms, of which she kept bowing to the finance minister of China repetitively, which was very odd. And then she was asked about this announcement that we just played on July 7th. Secretary Yellen, this is direct competition to the U.S. dollar, and they're backing it with not air like the dollar, but they're backing it with gold, with precious metal. Secretary Yellen, what's your take? Here's what she said, quote, I just want to reiterate what I've said in the past, which is I think the United States can rest assured that the dollar is going to play the dominant role in facilitating international transactions and serving as a reserve currency in the years ahead. I don't see that role being threatened by any development, including the one that you've mentioned, such as the BRICS common currency, end quote. Ed, were those the mushrooms talking?
Well, look, she's a member of the deep state, just like everybody else is on Wall Street and in the banking system. What else is she going to say? She has to, toe the party line. She's not going to say, yeah, well, I'll tell you what, we've been abusing our currency since 1971, and just raping the world in general. And we're not surprised at all if somebody's finally, had the gonads to stand up and say we're going to back the currency, go back to the gold standard, which we should never have left in the first place. So yes, it definitely, the days of the U.S. Having the world's reserve currency are numbered, and you should be buying gold. She's not going to say that. She has to say exactly what she said, because she wants everybody, they want everybody on the boat when it sinks. And the last thing that the banks of the world want now is everybody running to precious metals and commodities, and she's just towing the party line, like I said.
Ernest Hemingway wrote the book For Whom the Bell Tolls. If we exhumed Hemingway and awoken him from his deep slumber and said, Ernie, for whom the bell tolls, who's the bell tolling? Ed, there's a good chance he would say the dollar. Am I off?
No, not at all. It's all fiat currencies throughout all of recorded history, and there's no exceptions to this, have all ended up the same way, crashing and burning and being, hyper-inflated or hyper-inflated away. And the U.S. dollar and the Canadian dollar, I live in Canada, Canadian dollar is the same, and British pound and the euro and whatever other currency you want to come up with all end up the same way, end up being worthless. And there's no question that's exactly what Hemingway would say. And as a matter of fact, I have a quote on my desktop right now, which I'm going to read and which I've used in my column countless times over the last 15 or 20 years. And this is another quote of his, which is equally famous and absolutely the God's truth. And he says, the first panacea for a mismanaged nation is inflation of the currency. The second is war. Both bring a temporary prosperity. Both bring a permanent ruin. But both are the refuge of political and economic opportunists. And if I had to describe the West as we know it today, including the United States and Canada and everybody else, that is the accurate description of what we're looking at today.
Folks, we're speaking with Ed Steer from edsteer.goldandsilver.com. Ed, take us through the various scenarios August 22nd to the 24th at this BRICS meeting. Many people say, oh, nothing's going to happen. It's just going to keep on keeping on. Ed, what's your take?
I'll tell you what, I'm watching it, and nobody really knows for sure what's going to come out of this thing. I know that this is a topic of conversation. I've heard people say, well, like you said, it's going to end up being nothing. But I can absolutely guarantee you it's going to be far from that, and whether it gets decided at this meeting, I don't know. Like everybody else, I'm just going to watch and see how this thing turns out. But the fact that, that Russia and China would even be mentioning this in public, for public consumption, means that it's at some point in time, and probably sooner rather than later, it's going to be a fait accompli, and they're going to come up with a new international payment, between countries. It's not going to be a currency that you and I can spend, but it's going to be a payment for goods and services between their own countries that does not involve the U.S. dollar at all, and we'll just cut them completely out of the equation entirely so they can't be hurt by the U.S. in any of their foreign transactions. That's the ultimate goal of this whole thing. But once they go on that, once that is actually realized, then it's going to be just a matter of time before the rest of the countries follow suit, because all paper currencies, including the U.S. dollar, are going to slide against that. And Rome wasn't built in a day, as they say, and this gold-backed currency won't be built in a day either. But somebody's got their foot in the door already, and it's just a matter of time as when it's all going to happen.
And to add to those people that say, okay, they're going to trade another currency, fine, there's a new reserve, it's backed by gold, silver, oil, natural, whatever. That's not going to have any ramifications for me, Joe and Jane Public that lives in the United States or in North America. No, Ed, it's going to have enormous ramifications. Educate our listeners on the ramifications to them at a micro level, at a family level, if when this occurs, not if, when this occurs.
Okay, well, first of all, you have to look at the macro picture. The first thing that's going to happen is the demand for U.S. currency, okay, whether it be cash or bonds issued by the Treasury and the Federal Reserve. That is going to crater. It just isn't going to be a requirement for these countries, when they trade with each other, to convert their local currencies into U.S. dollars and then buy whatever and then convert it back into local currency. That'll be gone, okay? The demand for U.S. dollars or Treasury notes, any kind of U.S. paper, will vanish overnight. And what will happen is that will debase the U.S. dollar even faster than it's going now. And right now, I think the dollar's, 100, U.S. Dixie is 100 basis points. I could see that falling in half or more. And then all of a sudden, everything that the United States imports goes up twice as much. Okay, because it takes twice as many dollars. Right now we're seeing slow motion inflation. Once the U.S. dollar starts to head south seriously, then it's going to get really, really bad. And, we've seen it in Argentina and in Germany and in Zimbabwe and every other country that you can imagine that has burned their currency. And this is going to happen here. It's going to have an immediate impact on not just the U.S., okay, but any country that has a fiat currency where it's no longer required for international transactions. It's going to disappear, and the ramifications will be noticeable immediately.
And Ed, when you look behind the curtain, to me, the precious metals markets have changed, if you will. The public might not see it, but if you follow the numbers like you do through your great report 5 days a week, Ed Steer, Gold and Silver Digest, Ed, it appears to me, and tell me if I'm off, the gold and silver markets are changing underneath the surface, and I believe it's in preparation for this meeting and their subsequent announcement. Am I off?
No, not at all. The change, and you have to look for these and know where to look to find them. The first thing is, of course, the world's central banks over the last 10 or so years have been buying gold at a rate they haven't done since the 1950s. It is or 1960s. It's amazing just how much they're buying quietly and hoping nobody will notice. This has been going on for a long time, and of course, China has been building up its gold reserves since the year 2000 or 2008, and it's widely believed that they have north of 20,000 tons of gold stashed away, hidden away that they haven't reported. Of course, Russia, which is a big gold producer, has a huge amount as well. Europe has already got a lot. The United States says they have a lot. We don't know whether they have it all or not. But the fact of the matter is that the rush for gold is very quiet by the central banks, but it is there. And the general public, in general, doesn't know what's happening. But there's a certain segment that's been buying precious metals for the last 5-10 years. They know exactly what's coming. And it's very, very stealthy, but there certainly are changes not only in the physical market, but in the paper market that controls it as well.
And Ed, haven't you seen issues arise in the silver inventories and the like? A lot of movement.
Oh yes, absolutely. We'll talk about silver specifically here. The fact of the matter is that we've been running a physical deficit in silver for at least the last 2 years. The amount of silver being moved in and out of the COMEX depositories in New York is absolutely off the charts. It's hundreds of thousands of ounces per year that's being moved. It's almost It's incredible how much is disappearing off the COMEX, out of the various ETFs and mutual funds, particularly SLV. I think the Silver Institute forecasts a deficit of 260 million ounces of physical silver for the year 2023 in progress. And you can see signs that it is in fact happening, because it's just disappearing hand over fist. And it's just a matter of time before that's reflected in the price. It came close to happening last Wednesday, but the bank stepped in and killed the rally right away. And instead of a $2 rally, it could have easily been a $20 or $200 rally, because that's how low silver prices compared to what it really should be at.
And Ed, there's only a finite period of time they can put the brakes on these rallies, correct?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about it. I mean, they can control the price with paper, but they can't control the fact that the physical market is getting depleted every single solitary day. There's a limit to how much of this physical silver that's out there right now is available for sale, and it's a very, very tiny amount, according to silver analyst Ted Butler.
And obviously, the BRICS stepping in and saying, we're going to back our new trading currency with precious metals, it sure throws a ringer in their manipulation operation, doesn't it?
Yeah, the moment it's declared and the moment that they've decided on this thing, the whole picture changes. And from that point on, good luck trying to buy the stuff at any price. Right now, it's on sale. And if you can afford to put a few dollars into it, I would advise you to do it before it becomes unavailable.
Ed, in our concluding minute and a half, educate our listeners on your fantastic digest that you put out 5 days a week, and how folks can network with you and learn more about your efforts.
Well, you've been advertising it since I got on the air, Dave. You know, I write a column about international finance, monetary policy, and the precious metals 5 days a week. And it costs $100 US for about 260 copies per year. And I've been doing it now I've been writing on the internet now since the late 1990s. And been doing this newsletter for the last 12, 15 years. So if people are interested, they can go to my website, edsteergoldsilver.com. There's a sample column there, and they can read through that and decide whether or not what the information I give is worthwhile or not.